morning and welcome to the lecture series on partition of India in print media and cinema. So, today we are going to continue with our discussion on the accounts of the survivor as understood through readings of short stories and fictions based on at the backdrop of partition. So, short stories and fictions produced and written at the against the backdrop of partition. So, talking about Rajinder Singh Bedi's Lajwanti, it is a short story that explores the plight of the abducted woman during the upheavals of the subcontinent's partition in 1947. So, the entire story is symptomatic of the male obsession and fixity around women's body and sexuality during and after the partition. So, the story goes like this: Lajo is a village girl and she is wife of Sundarlal, one of the prominent men in the village, and she is abducted and taken across the border to Pakistan, where she is raped and forced to cohabit with her abductor, and later the activists actually rehabilitate her and bring her back to India. She is reunited with her husband Sundarlal. Partition feminists observe that rehabilitation of abused women to their respective family members was in fact a problematic project, where the government's moralistic paternalistic stance would not often match with what the victim herself wanted. And so, the victim was not given the option of choosing who she wanted to live with and where she wanted to locate herself, where she could identify herself with. So, this entire process of relocating the abducted woman from the false or fake to the real family was also a way of executing the male desire of appropriating and dominating the woman's body and reducing her body as identifier of a specific group. So, when we read Lajwanti, we are also reminded of what Benedict Anderson said about nation, as a nation being conceived through horizontal comradeship and a kind of homosocial bonding and fraternity, where the woman is conspicuously absent. In the same way, we see Aisha Jalal observing that women's integration into nationhood does not follow the same trajectory as the males, as the men. Further, Antius and Yuval Davis would study how this discourse of nationalism use women as key signifiers and implicate them as symbolic construction, which in turn help to solidify ethnic categories. So, women in the process of serving as boundary markers tend to jeopardize their own positions and their own rights. So, in the current time space of the story, we see that Lajo is an abducted and repatriated woman, and she is a taboo ridden figure. And so, her husband Sundarlal is, he is distraught with a sense of insecurity, and yet he is trying to hide the discomfort that he feels upon her coming back. So, once Lajo is taken away, she is abducted, Sundarlal throws himself into social work. He actually defends the idea that women should be taken into the fold of family. They should be treated with dignity and respect, because it is not their fault that they are abducted. So, Sundarlal really we see that he thinks of Lajwanti, of the times that they spent together, but that is distinctly different. It's a different situation. It's a distinctly different situation from when, I mean, the situation is distinctly different when Lajwanti comes back in actuality, and Sundarlal basically has to practice what he had been preaching all this while. So, he would we see in the story, he would go out on Prabhat ferries, he would revisit and question orthodox positions, you know, orthodox positions betrayed by some of his fellow village men, who said that like Ram had not taken back Sita, the abducted women should not be taken back, and he actually challenges that. He says that these women are not at fault, they ought to be treated with respect. But things become very different, like I said, when once his own estranged wife is sent back to his home. So, the author tells the readers that Lajo had tattooed her body when she was a child. So, Lajo had several tattoos on her bodies, and we see that these tattoos, which are generally seen as parts of a shared custom in an Indian setting, they hold very different meanings after Lajo's marriage with Sundarlal. So, Lajo's body after her marriage becomes a personal possession, and it can be rightfully demanded, it can be desired, it can be explored, controlled, and it can be abused at Sundarlal's will. So, Sundarlal discovers her tattoos, and in her absence, when she is taken away, he is remembering the physical aspects of Lajwanti. And so, we see that these tattoos, besides their aesthetic dimension, they also gain erotic meanings. So, they represent the romance between Sundarlal and Lajo, and they testify to the memory that the two have exclusively shared. So, Sundarlal describes Lajo as supple and tender like a young mulberry bush. So, a person that could endure beating at the hands of her husband and still smile. So, we see in these descriptions in Sundarlal's remembrance, there are sexist and sadist innuendos. At this stage, we understand that Lajwanti, as Sundarlal's wife, was an exclusive, a perfect embodiment of the husband's desire, and she was a manifestation of his fantasy and lust. So, she is also the ideal candidate of state sponsored protectionism, because she is docile. She internalizes the idea that a male is masculine enough only when he beats up his wife, otherwise not. So, she actually, Lajo takes pride in the fact that Sundarlal beats her. It's an expression of the husband's love and control over the wife. So, Lajo, a docile woman like her, who endorses and internalizes and repeats the patriarchal, ideas, is a puppet in the hands of two nations, and she becomes puppet in the hands of at least two men, one being her husband, who used to beat her before her abduction when she was happily married with him, and later a puppet in the hand of the abductor. So, when a fellow villager brings the news of Lajo's return at the Indo-Pakistan border, the significance of her tattoos suddenly change. So, Sundarlal and the messenger are trying to confirm that it is in fact Lajo in a crowd of other abducted women through discussing her tattoos. This is something very significant in the story. When such an intricate discussion is happening in the absence of Laju and in a public forum, we see Sundarlal is compromising the privacy of Laju's body to a complete stranger. So, a husband that was so possessive of her at one point shows a sense of disowning her. He is inquiring to a fellow village man about Laju as though she is an outsider to him now. So, here Sundarlal's act betrays his feeling that a rehabilitated woman's body can be treated as a public object of judgment or discussion. So, it is very difficult to again resituate a woman like Laju within the familial coordinates. So, now Sundarlal becomes an actor, a national actor that imagines her as an individual of national concern. So, as a husband, Sundarlal is succumbing to and partakes in the social process of opening up her bodily exclusivity to the public knowledge. And so, we see that Sundarlal is actually complying with the larger scheme of rehabilitation. A woman that has been known by at least two men, because a woman has been made to cohabit with a man other than her husband, can be sliced up through a homosocial discourse. Laju is being sliced up through a homosocial discourse because she is not in the custody of a single male guardian. So, as a recovered commodity, Laju is disposed to multiple male gazes and her body is available for deconstruction and shared analysis. So, people are analyzing her, discussing her, and so from being Sundarlal's coveted wife and to becoming a war prize of an unknown male and afterwards being recovered as a national asset, Laju is subjected to curious scrutiny. She is branded as a superior item of exchange, a commodity that Pakistan resents returning and India takes pride in claiming back. So, partition becomes a site of unmaking a village woman, a docile, meek woman such as Laju. It unmakes her sense of self and distinctiveness. So, when we talk about Sundarlal's body burning with an unknown fear, it refers not only to his jealousy, but also his sense of insecurity, his apprehension in the face of the moral obligation and dilemma of having to accommodate his now estranged wife. She is now an unfamiliar person to him, as good as unknown, and now she has to be brought back within the fold of within the familiar space of the household. So, it is actually a double paradox that Laju's much regulated body has suddenly become an unknown terrain for Sundarlal. It is an unclaimed terrain, almost no one wants to claim it, but it is Sundarlal's the character of the aspect of Sundarlal's character where he has this moral obligation, and he had been preaching earlier about bringing back the abducted women, that now he is almost obliged to take back his own wife in order to not contradict himself. So, he imagines her as alien, we would know why. So, if we look at her tattoos, as a reader, if we try to understand how the meanings of these tattoos change, they were earlier signs or symbols of her righteousness, her beauty, but now they are signifiers. After the woman is brought back, she is repatriated, they become signifiers of trespassing and immodesty, because although it does not, I mean, because her body albeit unwillingly has crossed the threshold of standard codes of behavior, and so it is a kind of problematic reunion between the husband and the wife. Bedi actually talking about a folk song on the Lajwanti plant. Do not touch Lajwanti, for she will curl up and die. So, these the lyrics conveys a wide range of messages and meanings. What happens to a docile village woman like Lajo when several men touch her? So, the name Lajwanti functions as a metaphor of feminine docility. She represents the unspoiled leaves, the untouched leaves of the Lajwanti plant. So, in the end we see that Laju is enmeshed in the Indian ideal of woman as Devi, and however, treatment as a Devi does not give her more respect. It is a way of putting her on the pedestal of the untouchable goddess, and it is a way of desexualizing her. So, denying her desire or sexuality, she is actually treated as someone that is superhuman, that has transcended all normal human conditions. So, Bedi sums up Lajo's condition in the following words: Lajwanti's sorrow had remained locked up in her breast. Helplessly she had gazed at her body and had realized that since the partition it was no longer her body, but the body of a goddess. So, we see that Sundarlal cannot outright reject her. There is a kind of wall between the husband and the wife. Sundarlal himself is also indirectly a victim of this project of rehabilitation, where he cannot face up to the fragment that has happened within himself. So, he is preaching something, he cannot execute and practice it when it comes to his own wife. So, there is a kind of opacity in the conjugal relation. There is no conjugal relation. In the absence of conjugal relationship, there is a kind of opacity where Lajo in fact cannot talk about her previous experiences with the abductor and his family in Pakistan. So, we see that there is this comparison, a constant parallel that is drawn between Sundarlal and Lajwanti's relationship with that of Ram and Sita. So, both Sita and Lajwanti were abducted by the enemy, but unlike Ram, Sundarlal accepts his rescued wife. However, what happens after this acceptance is actually a fact that remains within the precincts of home. It is the pain of the woman that is treated as the untouchable goddess. A version or a testimony that does not get recorded within the official historiography, within the male project of rehabilitation. So, when Sundarlal addresses Lajwanti as Devi, there is an attempt at erasing her identity and her everyday experiences with the other community. She is not allowed by Sundarlal to share anything from her past, although maybe that would have lightened her, but there could be insecurity or male ego that prevents Sundarlal from conversing or communicating with Lajwanti as a husband and not as a national actor. So, he is placing the blame for the stigma attached to Lajwanti's honor on the existing social conventions, and yet he is not powerful enough to invalidate these conventions. So, he invalidates any occasion to overcome these conventions. He is not powerful enough to overcome these conventions. So, the narrative suggests about the ambivalent terms, the problematic terms of Lajwanti's reintegration into the community and nation state. With this, I would like to conclude today's lecture, and we will meet again for another round of discussions. Thank you.